A lithium-ion battery cathode has nickel, manganese, and cobalt. Can you guys hear a cat meowing in the background?
We can definitely hear your cat, but we want the cat.
Okay,
The cat is awesome. We're cat
Sorry.
people on this podcast.
Okay.
This is ClimateTech with Kentaro, a podcast featuring the brightest minds and most influential voices in climate tech. I'm your host, Kentaro Kawamori. When you hear about our next guest's background and list of accomplishments, you'd think she'd be at the tail end of her career. But Ashley Zumwalt-Forbes, today's guest, is far from done at only 31 years old. She's had numerous titles under her belt, including co-founder and CEO of Black Mountain Carbon Lock today. Ashley was also named to Forbes 30 Under 30 for its 2020 class, which is actually how we met. In this episode, we're sharing Ashley's prolific experience in the mining business. We'll be talking about rare earth recycling and how her industry relates to decarbonization, and the importance of looking at supply chains when we talk about environmental impact. More importantly, Ashley shares with me the variety of challenges women face in male-dominated industries, including her own very devastating experience as a female founder. Ashley grew up in a small town in Oklahoma. She was the first in her family to go to university, and earlier in her career was a drilling engineer.
And so my background's petroleum engineering. I used to work on drilling rigs all over the world. So I always say, there's nothing you could tell me that would shock me. I don't know what would have to happen for me to start kind of getting squirmy, which I think is a very important quality. But after I was a drilling engineer, went and got an MBA and then wanted to become more entrepreneurial.
After earning her MBA at Harvard, Ashley moved from Boston to Fort Worth, Texas to join Black Mountain Oil and Gas. But between the time Ashley signed her offer to when she actually joined the company in 2017, Black Mountain Oil and Gas had already been sold.
So I showed up on my first day. I was like, okay, guys, what should I be doing? And it ended up being such a blessing. It's one of those points that I do look back on, and you can't chalk it up to anything but luck. Many things I like to say are hard work. Nothing could have gotten you there except hard work. This was luck, and I will be honest with you. That, a rep believed in me enough to say, well, I don't know, what do you think the future of Black Mountain looks like? And really gave me that freedom and that empowerment to just go figure it out.
And where that took Ashley was co-founding Black Mountain Metals in 2018. Which means she went from drilling engineer to international mining executive within a short time frame.
So to say that I was having a fair amount of imposter syndrome and really was taking a big swing, I think it's a little bit of an understatement. However, 5 years later, I absolutely love the mining business, and it's very much become my bread and butter. So 2018 started Black Mountain Metals, ended up selling Black Mountain Metals in 2021, which was a fantastic exit for us. A little sad because I felt like, it was my first child. In 2019, we bought 1.7 million acres in northern Western Australia. It's a nat gas play. We ended up IPOing that company late last year on the ASX. It's called Black Mountain Energy.
By the way, ASX means Australian Securities Exchange.
I do firmly believe in nat gas as a transition fuel. And then last year started a company called Black Mountain Carbon Lock, which is focused on the voluntary carbon market space, as well as launched a SPAC called Metals Acquisition Corp. Does exactly what it sounds like it would do, looking to buy metals and mining assets specifically focused on decarbonization.
And SPAC means Special Purpose Acquisition Company. Ashley did say at some point in our conversation that our space is bad when it comes to acronyms.
This year I got involved with an early stage rare earth recycling company called REEcycle, REEcycle. I'm an executive director as well as a major investor in that company. We just completed the acquisition, and it's something I'm really excited about because I think it touches on so many thematics across the climate tech space that are absolutely critical. Critical minerals. You have to have rare earths for decarbonization. in circular economy as well as supply chain security.
I think we need to find more stuff to keep you busy. I mean, you've got
I know.
you've got a carbon a carbon capture business going. You're doing an early stage rare earth recycling business, and you're doing a metals acquisition corp. Clearly, we need to find you more stuff to do.
I know. I'm all over the show. Look, what I do find is the things that I think are really interesting. If an opportunity comes down the pike, I want to be involved. Like, I'm genuinely passionate about it. And I'll figure out the schedule, right? But yes, I probably don't need additional things at the moment, Kentaro, to your point.
No, I love it. Look, that's been a philosophy that's been really successful for me personally and in my career is you have every conversation. Doesn't mean you then go into everything, but you're right. Like, go explore every opportunity because, see, I actually believe you make your own luck. And that's how you make your own luck is you go take every call and you meet everybody and then you figure out what to go do with it thereafter.
That's exactly
anyway, so
right. Yep.
So we can talk about nat gas as a transition fuel, but I'm actually selfishly super interested in learning more about mining because rare earths are such an important topic, right? It's critical infrastructure and critical materials for storage.
Absolutely.
Tell us about that rare earth recycling play. Just give us a quick, just rare earth 101.
Yes, absolutely. So first you're going to get a soapbox from me, Kentaro.
I like a good soapbox.
Here's kind of my broad thoughts on the mining business. And then we can dive into exactly which segments folks should pay attention to for decarbonization.
Great.
I often find mining is labeled as a dirty business. If you're looking at raising capital to go into a mining company, if you're looking at the mining space, it is an extractive industry and therefore is considered dirty. I think that's very dangerous. And I do think we need to walk ourselves back from that because what you're seeing is mine permits are being canceled in tier 1 jurisdictions that have very strong rules of law, really strong safety culture, strong stewardship of the environment. These are places we don't want mining permits canceled. And importantly, I think it's very critical to link metals to decarbonization. I'm going to go back to our idea on it's about the doers and not the thinkers at this stage. Things aren't created out of fairy dust, right? Like if I'm looking at my cell phone, that just didn't kind of happen. The materials have to come from somewhere. And if you can't grow it, you have to mine it. That's the adage of the mining business. But importantly, if you're looking at the materials that are needed in the future, for example, for lithium-ion batteries, a lithium-ion battery cathode has nickel, manganese, and cobalt. There's also a large lithium component in the electrolyte. Can you guys hear a cat meowing in the background?
We can definitely hear your cat, but we want the cat. The cat is awesome.
Sorry.
We're cat people on this podcast.
I just got in from out of town yesterday, and my cats tend to freak out when I come home. They're really excited for me to be back. So let me know and I can
I have two.
Move the cat.
Cats will make the podcast.
I have two as well. Yes. Okay. All right. So off the cats, back to mining. So again, lithium ion batteries obviously require a huge ramp up in production. Something that often isn't touched on as a battery metal or a decarbonization metal is copper. But copper is actually what underwrites absolutely everything. So copper has the strongest conductivity per ounce of any metal. And so what that means is copper wiring is far and away used for absolutely everything. With decarbonization going towards electrification, the copper intensity of products skyrockets. So when you're seeing copper mine permits canceled in Arizona, that's really disappointing because it means we're not going to have that copper coming online in a tier 1 jurisdiction. We might not have enough copper to fuel the decarbonization revolution. We're certainly going to have higher copper prices. So everything is just going to get more expensive.
Ashley just talked about battery metals and their relation to decarbonization. Here, we chat a bit more about green commodities like green oil and green mining, a topic which has been getting a lot of heat. that ultimately comes down to the quality of the offsets that they're purchasing, right?
Absolutely.
How do you think about that?
So I think it's really important to use removal credits, not avoidance credits.
Yep.
And so a removal credit is actually removing a ton of CO2 out of the atmosphere and either sequestering it, pulling it out via trees, via plants, via mangroves. But for whatever reason, that ton of CO2 is no longer in the atmosphere. I think that is the most robust kind of gold standard way to offset something. You're producing a ton of CO2, so you need to buy a negative ton of CO2 so that it's zero. Makes sense. Like, I think that is a very strong argument for having a green commodity, and that's what we're really starting to see a lot of. The things that I don't like to see as much is avoidance credits. I don't want to paint all of them with a broad brush of being bad. I think what we can agree on is they're less robust than a removal credit. An avoidance credit can be something where an activity is being avoided. So those carbon emissions are not being released into the atmosphere. And so there's a carbon credit available because that CO2 didn't get released. Okay. So in my mind, your operation is generating a ton of CO2. You buy an avoidance credit. So, somewhere in the world, a ton of CO2 didn't get released. That's great, but you still released a ton of CO2. You didn't actually offset it. And so that is the biggest issue with carbon credits, I think. With anything, you have bad actors, but we need robust offsets because if you look at where the world is right now, you see just a tremendous amount of net zero commitments, countries, companies, funds. And I know I'm preaching to the choir with you, Kentaro, but like just an enormous amount of commitments. It's not incredibly clear how people get there. I do think it is very clear how we reduce emissions, and that's amazing, and we should do it. You do kind of stare at it and say, like, there's a little bit of an irreducible sum here at the end. Say 1,000% best efforts are made, we reduce it, and you still got that chunk. What that chunk is it needs to be offset with removal credits so that we are getting to zero.
Yeah, I really appreciate your stance on that, and I wholeheartedly agree with it, right? The commodity sector globally is so massive, and these companies have so much influence through their capital base, through their supply chains, it's so unpragmatic for people to sit there and say, pursuing net zero ton of steel, or oil, whatever, doesn't make sense. Like, it makes a ton of sense. You want them to be leveraging their resources and capital to put it into, exactly as you pointed out, high quality removal, not avoidance. So I totally agree with that nuance. But yeah, and this is one of the things that always sort of irks me in the environmentalist sort of, super concentrated academic perspective of it, right? Like, eliminate fossil fuels, like, get rid of these commodities. Like, these folks just don't live in the real world. And, I'm an environmentalist. I'm a technologist.
Absolutely.
And a capitalist, and you got to understand market forces if we want to actually fix these things. And I think that's a big gap. So
I think it's a very dangerous position to take that we should do no level of carbon offsets. We just need to completely reinvent everything. I think if that is the only stance, it means absolutely nothing's going to happen. And we can't stand that for today's climate. We clearly need things to change. I think if you're holding people to completely reinvent everything, destroy it, and build it back from the ground up, nothing's going to happen. So we need to be measured, we need to be practical, and we need to have actual results.
Totally agree. And what happens is people just lose pragmatism and realism in the middle.
Yes.
And I think this topic is exactly that. Is like, no, we can't have offsets. We can't hope on the silver bullet. Well, yeah, we shouldn't hope for a silver bullet, but it's probably a pretty fucking good idea to still try to build one. Like, it doesn't mean we shouldn't be doing it.
Yes. Kentaro and Ashley bringing back pragmatism 2022. There.
I like that. Well, that'll be the platform we run on.
There we go.
For whatever non-political office that gives us that same influence.
I hate to break it to you, but I'm not interested in politics.
That makes two of us.
I'm interested in politics, not in running.
So fun fact, I once almost went the political science route and interned, would have gone the staffer route on the Hill at my senator's office when I was graduating high school in New Mexico. So there you go.
I have no doubt you would have been great, but that does surprise me.
I have no doubt I would have hated it, so it was a crisis averted.
Yes.
In January this year, Ashley joined REEcycle as its executive director. Broadly, the company recovers rare earth elements from electronic waste.
One of the particularly troubling facts about rare earths, and there are a lot of very troubling facts if you really look at the business, is that greater than 90% of the supply chain is controlled by China. Call me crazy, not a position we want ourselves in. The reason that has happened is twofold. One, they have a tremendous amount of rare earth resources. You can't actually pick up resources and move them to a different country or a different part of the world. Like, they are where they are. The second piece is that processing rare earths is nasty. And I mean this. Like, hey, I am like the spokesperson for mining being clean. Processing rare earths, not good. So you have radioactive byproducts, very, very damaging kind of side products that come out of the processing of rare earths. And so in order to get a permit to do that, you almost definitely have to go to China because other countries won't let you process. So for example, our shining, U.S. rare earth mine, Mountain Pass, they can't process on site. So they send to China. And so that's a dangerous spot for us to be in, right? We can't paint ourselves into this corner where all of a sudden, we don't have access to any rare earths to make products. That entire thematic and that backdrop is why I'm so bullish on a technology that can recycle rare earths. So currently, what happens to end of life? We'll take wind turbines, for example. Goes to a landfill. The blades made of fiberglass, like really hard to recycle. Although people are working on ways to not just send everything to landfills, which I love. I like never bet against human ingenuity. The rare earth magnets also wind up in landfills. No current way to recycle them. You can't really do anything with them. And so it's just a complete zero. Zero for the environment, zero for the people who own the wind turbines. What this company, REEcycle, has done is create an opportunity for people who have end-of-life wind turbines, end-of-life MRIs, end-of-life hard drives to have a revenue stream. We will buy the magnets from you. We crush the magnets, put it through kind of a proprietary reactor process that has no damaging byproducts, by the way. At the end, you're left with water as well as ND and PR oxides. It's about as clean of a process as you can imagine. Importantly, we want this to be a supply chain that's fully independent of China. So we think that's really, really important for the West to have a vertically integrated rare earth supply chain.
I love that you went there. You covered some pretty major geopolitical and national security implications there. And you're exactly right? We need to have more, sort of closed loop supply chain capabilities, across the world. Not to mention just the shipping cost of all these things is insane, right? Transportation. What about things like deep sea mining? And we spoke about asteroid mining not too long ago.
Yeah.
These things sound crazy, but I mean, we're flying tourists to space now, right? So they're probably not that unreachable in the future, but maybe deep sea mining feels like maybe more realistic, but I don't know. I know James Cameron's down there, with his badass submarine filming stuff, the next Avatar movie, but that's about all I know.
Look, again, never bet against human ingenuity. And in 50 years, I might look back on my comments today and think like, man, Ashley, you should have had more faith. Like, you really should have taken a bigger swing. My thoughts are, if metal prices are high enough to warrant us mining the bottom of the ocean or mining asteroids, we're toast. Like, we're toast anyway, right? Like, we're not going to be able to make products if metal prices are that expensive. Deep sea mining, and again, don't throw stones. However, it is really challenging on the environment. It's incredibly expensive. It's very dirty business. And so that is one of the things that I think, if that's what we're considering to allegedly decarbonize the economy, I think we're approaching it all wrong. We're not looking at the supply chain. I think everything is about looking at exactly how carbon intensive and environmentally damaging each step of the process is, making an informed decision after that what the end product should be. If we ever start mining the bottom of the ocean or asteroids, I think we've chosen the wrong end product. My biggest caveat here, again, is there could be a leap forward in innovation. And genuinely, I hope there is. Like, I really am very bullish on human ingenuity and the ability to innovate. We're not there. We should not be mining those places right now.
As a young woman in a male-dominated industry, I spoke with Ashley about her journey and the challenges she had to face. In my whole network, especially in energy, massively dominated by men, especially men of a certain demographic.
Mm-hmm.
I always tell people, one of the most eye-opening moments in my career was when I get to Chesapeake Energy and I get to one of my first executive meetings, and we have this big U-shaped table, very typical public company, let's hold court in this room. And there were 27 vice presidents are up. And I sat next to our marketing leader, who was an Indian woman, and every single other person in the room was a male over the age of 50 and white.
Mm-hmm.
Talk a little bit about, what's it like to be a woman in the space, but not just a woman, a super young 31-year-old woman.
Super young, yes.
That's a pretty unique combo, right? Like, there's got to be both challenges and opportunities with that. I would imagine, sadly, at times probably more challenges, but
right.
Love to hear a bit about that.
Yes. So again, I'll focus on the positive initially, because I always like to start with the good, because I do genuinely believe in the good. My first job out of undergrad, I was working on drilling rigs all around the world. So I'd live on rigs for 28 days at a time, and then I'd have 28 days off work. So it's called a 28-28 schedule. Pretty normal for drilling engineers.
Is that where the movie 28 Days Later comes from?
Honestly, maybe, Kentaro. It's definitely what it felt at the end of those 28 days. You
Best zombie movie ever.
I felt like a zombie at the end. But
there we go. Maybe that's where it's from.
I've never heard that. I'm using that joke for myself in the future. So thanks to that. But the rig supervisors really looked out for me, which was fantastic. And I chalk that up to the company's culture and just the quality of people that I worked with. Now, I will say, after I transitioned kind of out of my early career into more of an entrepreneurial role, unfortunately, things got harder for me. All of a sudden, I was trying to raise capital, the only woman in the room. And to your point, Kentaro, everyone in the room is also white. So my heart just goes out to particularly women of color who have two differentiating factors. And it's just really hard to not realize how much, in these situations, you are the X in a room full of Ys. And oftentimes, I had real challenges of being given more of the alpha's housework, always having to send the invites, always being the organizer, and not being able to focus on real strategy, which, that's what you hired me for. I make more than these guys. Why am I the one sending out the invite, or cleaning up PowerPoints, or just being asked things that I wouldn't have been asked to do had I been a man? It still happens to me today. In my position today, I will call out the behavior, because I think, these behaviors die when you shine light on them. And I try to do it in a really positive way. I won't call them out in front of a group of people, but I'll just take people aside and I'll say, look, here's what you said. I'm not upset, but I want to make sure that that's not happening to other young women. Because Me, like, I've never been accused of being a wallflower a day in my life, so I probably will stand up for myself. I just want to make sure that I'm improving things and leaving the workforce better for women who come up behind me. So I will say office housework is an issue. I'll say kind of having, there's like the bitch factor, right? And oftentimes women are, it's so easy to categorize women who are out there kind of like busting balls and like doing deals and being aggressive, which if I was a male, I would be applauded for. As a woman, there's this stupid like gossip website in Australia that actually is a big deal. It's called Hot Copper. The Hot Copper follows every ASX listed company. And I was doing a hostile takeover of a company. And instead of saying like, man, that Ashley, she's a badass, I was called the Black Widow, which I still have maintained this nickname further on. And it was claimed that I was sleeping with all the board directors so that they would vote for my hostile takeover, and not that I was just, making a strong business case. So those behaviors I have zero tolerance for, and I just think it's an absurd situation.
While Ashley shared such an appalling experience as a leader in her industry, she also shared with me some really positive and exciting news about her personal life.
I'm currently pregnant, which big news, Kentaro. Woohoo.
What?
I know. And it's a little girl.
Amazing.
And so I know. And so even more so than before, I feel a great responsibility now that I have kind of climbed to where I have that, both myself and everyone else, we need to make sure that we're stomping out these behaviors. So I would challenge everyone, if you see women who are being asked to do more office housework than everyone else, if you see women who maybe don't get invited to lunch when all the boys go out, invite her. She wants to feel part of the team as well. And definitely, if you see these disgusting behaviors, you need to put a stop to it, because even if it's not you, if you see it happening, it's just a horrible reflection on the team, on the company, and just something that no one should stand for. I know I focused all my comments today on being a woman, but again, it's for everyone who's an X in a room full of Ys. I'm not saying I'm unique or special just because, my X in a room full of Ys is that I'm a woman, but people of color, people of different sexual orientations, religions, like we all face even these microaggressions that do just make it harder. You don't enjoy working as much when it's just a constant fight of like, just treat me like a person, right? And so it can be very disappointing. But again, like when you see bad things happening, even if you're not an X in a room full of Ys, you should be trying to make the world a more hospitable place for everyone else.
Well, we really appreciate you sharing all your wisdom. It's been super, super enlightening. Is there anything you would want to close on to sort of the broader climate tech community? Any message you want to leave behind?
Yes, it's something that was laced throughout the entire podcast, but I would challenge you to look not just at the end product or the end use, but look at supply chains as a whole and treat each segment of the supply chain as if they were the end product. And you're going to raise all ships. You're going to have a better outcome.
Love it. Well, thanks again. We really appreciate the time. It's been amazing learning, and we'll catch you on the next one. I'll have to have you back for sure.
Absolutely. I had so much fun, Kentaro. Thanks so much.
If you want to learn more about Ashley's work at Black Mountain Carbon Lock, visit bmcarbonlock.com and REEcycle at recycleinc.com. Before we go, please don't forget to subscribe to ClimateTech with Kentaro on Apple Podcasts or whatever platform you listen on. In case you haven't heard, we also launched ClimateTech Deal Digest, where I highlight M&A and funding news in the climate tech space. We drop new episodes every Tuesday. Thank you all for listening, and I'll catch you on our next episode. ClimateTech with Kentaro is produced by our incredible team at Persefoni and Hueman Group Media. Our theme music is by Guest House. And if you want to learn more about Persefoni and our climate management and accounting platform, please visit our website at persefoni.com.